Coming up on NewsNite, we analyze the election results, and we also find out whether civility played a part in that election. That's next on NewsNite. Good evening. Welcome to NewsNite for November 9th, 3 days out from the general election that has so dominated our collective conscience. A little bit later on in the program, we're going to reprise the civility panel that was part of NewsNite on September 7th to find out if civility did in fact have a place in this election. But first, I have a wonderful panel who's going to help me analyze the results of the elections to join us tonight. I want to welcome Steve Hoffman, political writer from the Akron Beacon Journal.
Thank you.
Stephanie Warsmith, political writer also and reporter from the Akron Beacon Journal. And Dr. John Green, who will also be in the second portion of our program. Dr. Green is the executive director of the Bliss Institute of Applied Politics at the University of Akron. Welcome. Big sigh of relief from everybody?
Yes, I'm planning to take days off and go rake leaves.
There you go. I want to start with just some basic general impressions from each of you about the presidential election and the whole cycle that we've been through. So give me some of your capsule thoughts about this.
Well, when I look back on the campaign, one of the things that we certainly wrote a lot about on the editorial board, and I think really was a factor in Ohio, was the auto bailout, and how prominent a place that placed in the campaign, in the Obama campaign. You know, he reminded everybody of it constantly, and I really think it helped him with that, with white male voters in Ohio, and I think that was an important thing to watch, and it was a big risk at the time, right. And he got obviously. Obama got a lot of criticism for it initially, but I think in the end it really helped him in Ohio.
Steph?
I would agree with Steve on the auto bailout. Every campaign event I covered locally, the Obama people were, definitely emphasizing that. Another thing that I think really stood out about the election was money. You just saw, you expected it, and you saw just, lots and lots of money being spent at the presidential level and in the congressional races. I covered the 16th district, which was Renacci and Sutton, and as of the latest filings, $10 million had been spent by outside groups just in that congressional race alone, about an equal amount against both of those candidates. I talked to Jim Renacci. He said one night he and his wife were watching a show without the DVR live, and they saw 9 ads. So, that was just something extraordinary about this race that came out of the Citizens United case.
John?
In a lot of ways, the 2012 race was a classic kind of race. It was a base mobilization race, an election that was really about turnout. And I think that was particularly true at the presidential level. And Obama basically won the swing states and another term in the White House because he had a better mobilization program for voters. And it's not that Romney and the Republicans did awful. They actually did better than John McCain in 2008, but they didn't do enough better to catch the president's mobilization efforts.
Well, I keep hearing the pundits say that this is a status quo election because we are left with the same president, the same majority in the House, same majority in the Senate. So my next question to the three of you would be, where do we go from here? And is there hope that we can get past the bipartisan or the bickering that has gone on for the last 4 years?
I guess I would say slim in this sense that. The number of competitive states seems to be decreasing. So we seem to be dividing into red areas of the country and blue areas of the country. Then within Ohio, we've also segregated ourselves by congressional district and state legislative district because of the redistricting process. You seem to have, legislative districts and congressional districts either predominantly Democrat or predominantly Republican. That, to me, does not augur well for compromise because these people got to go back to their district in 2 years, right. Or whatever, some interval, but at least quickly 2 years for people in the House and the U.S. House, and run again. Right. And so they're vulnerable, as we've said many times, they're vulnerable in primaries by members of their own party who are off to the left or right, and so that drives that drives the election, drives people to the extremes, unfortunately, and then they get to Washington or into the State House in Columbus, and they're not in much mood to compromise.
John?
I would agree with that. One of the ironies of this election is after all the controversy, the money, all the time spent, from a policy perspective, there's virtually no change. The Democrats control the White House and the Senate. They can't break a filibuster in the Senate, and the Republicans control the House of Representatives. And I hate to be pessimistic about this, but when I look in the election returns, I see no incentives for compromise at all. Now, that doesn't mean there can't be compromise, but it's going to have to come from leadership. Our elected leaders in Washington, whether it's the president or Speaker Boehner or whomever, are going to have to step up and do something very risky. Now, they have a little moment to do this because, we're after the election and the next election isn't for 2 years. But if they don't move very quickly and do some really innovative things, I think we're going to be stuck in the same cycle we've been in for the last few years.
Oh. Well, I do want to move ahead and talk about some of the state races that I think were very important. And I'd like to start with issue 2, which was the state issue that would have changed, like you were talking about, Steve, the whole redistricting effort. And that went down to abysmal failure.
I think that people didn't understand it, and,
There was a lot of money, though, in opposition to it, true.
But I think that, when you get in, when you get your absentee ballot or you get in the voting booth and you see an issue that is this long and you're like, what is this? What is this going to do? I mean, maybe some people read up on it before, and I do think that a lot of people think that the redistricting process as it is currently done is problematic. But I'm not sure that they understood how this would solve that or whether it would. And so I think if you're confused, your tendency is to vote no.
One of the other races I want to talk about was the senatorial race between incumbent Sherrod Brown and Ohio State Treasurer Josh Mandel. Thoughts about that particular race?
Well, in the next segment, we will talk about the lack of civility in Ohio politics, and that will be exhibit number 1.
Yes.
But, I think it was a much more competitive race than that kind of race normally would be, largely because of the vast amount of money spent in the race. But it's important to remember that money was spent on both sides in that race. And in the end, I think the experience of Sherrod Brown, both politically and in policy terms, ended up being the difference. So,
yeah, I think Josh Mandel ran a shallow, cynical campaign, even by Ohio standards, which are not exactly very high, as John is alluding to. I think what was interesting about this time about Sherrod Brown, I got a little sense of the old Howard Metzenbaum voice, not literally, but it just in terms of themes from Sherrod Brown. In other words, with Howard, he's a liberal, but he's our liberal.
Yes,
and
the
some
same
people actually said that during the campaign.
And the same sense I got with Sherrod Brown. Yeah, he's a liberal, but he's fighting for us. He's our liberal, and I think that helped. But just anyway, my fear with Mandel and the outside money was we were going to set a new low in Ohio politics for a very inexperienced candidate, one who assiduously avoided stands on big issues until the very end. He didn't have a stand on the auto bailout until the very end of the campaign. And if a candidate like that could win in a state like Ohio, I mean, to me, the floodgates are open because of Citizen United and other decisions. All this, it would be a signal that you could take somebody, the proverbial empty suit, and
throw enough money at them,
and they could win. And that to me is a pretty scary proposition.
The other race I want to talk about quickly, state level, was in fact the race, and you alluded to it, I think, Steph, between Jim Renacci and Betty Sutton. Right. That was a race that, again, redistricting probably determined even before voters went to the polls, correct?
Right. I was talking to Betty Sutton this morning about that race, and this was her first time losing. She had never lost a race during her career, starting back from Barberton City Council through the State House, where she was term limited out, so she didn't actually lose there, then running for Sherrod Brown's seat, getting into Congress. And one constant during all that was that she had never lost a precinct in Barberton. So I said, you didn't have Barberton this time, so that was why you lost. So, but I wouldn't be surprised, and Steve and John, could weigh in on this if Betty Sutton decided to run again at some level at some time here and make, kind of another political comeback, just as she made after she was term limited out of the House. Now, one of the things that I think was interesting about the outcome of the local congressional races is that we no longer have a representative from within Summit County representing, from within the borders that is representing our area, but yet other people that I've talked to, including John's cohort at the Bliss Institute, Steve Brooks, said, perhaps that isn't that important, that these representatives have an interest in representing their entire district because they need to satisfy people so that they can get reelected. So perhaps that it won't have that much of a bearing.
The Sutton-Renacci race did attract a lot of attention because we had two incumbent members running in a district, in a redrawn district that leaned Republican, but where neither had large name recognition. Right. So if there was going to be a place where all this big money was going to make a difference, it was going to be in that race. And I suspect it did make a difference because it was much closer than it might otherwise have been. The district was drawn Republican, so in the end of the day, I think that the lines made a difference.
Yeah, it was a 5-point district going in. And Renacci won by, I think, about 4 percentage points. So he did not perform as well as the index would indicate. And this was an uphill fight for Betty Sutton from beginning, because besides the Republican index, a +5, I believe that about 50% of the territory was new for Renacci, but like 80% of it was new for Betty Sutton. Right. So, yes, both of them had their challenge to reintroduce themselves or to introduce themselves to new voters. But the challenge weighed more heavily against Betty Sutton than Jim Renacci. And he was a former mayor of Wadsworth and a very polished, you see Jim Renacci out in the campaign trail. I find some of his, I don't agree with a lot of his positions, and make that clear, but he's a very polished speaker.
Well, we've got about a minute here for this televised portion of the program, and then we're going to jump into the web. But I do want to talk about Summit County. And voter turnout was almost 72%, 71.4%. Steph, you talked about, there were long lines. Were the number of voters going to the polls, was that the reason for the long lines?
Well, I know actually, because I've talked to them, that the Board of Elections is going to be looking at what happened in Summit County. There were, of course, long lines across the state because you have more interest in a presidential election, but you had a little bit lower turnout in Summit County this time as you did in 2008, but you really had more problems. And so they think that likely was caused by the fact that they cut precincts and they cut polling places between the primary and the general election. So they're now looking at what can we do to make it better. And so are there things like electronic poll books? Are there different steps that they can take that will make this smoother in the future?
Well, hold that thought, because what we're going to do is jump to newsnight.net.
For more NewsNight content, including extended discussions, full interviews, and the chance to speak your mind about the issues, join us online at newsnight.net.
We are back for our second segment of our post-election show here on Newsnight. And 2 months ago, we sat down with a political scientist, a woman of the cloth, and a multimedia journalist. The three of them are involved in a collaborative project called the Ohio Civility Project, a joint effort to try to bring more civility into not only politics, but into all civil discourse. And we decided at that time to bring them back after the election to find out if, in fact, civility did have a role in this election. So I want to introduce you to Dan Malthrop, who is the curator of conversation with the Civic Commons, the Reverend Diana Swoop, who is the senior pastor at the Arlington Church of God, and John Green rejoins us from our first segment of the program. John is, of course, the director of the Ray C. Bliss Institute of Applied Politics at the University of Akron. Hi, guys.
Hey there, Jody.
Welcome to have you back.
It's good to be back.
For the viewers who did not see that September 7th show, and I do want to tell viewers, go to the NewsNight website. That's www.newsnight.net. September 7th program. It's really a very good program.
It may have been the best ever.
Undoubtedly. I had the three best panelists ever. But for those
undoubtedly.
For those viewers who maybe are not familiar with this, what is the Civility Code and the Ohio Civility Project?
Well, this Ohio Civility Project was an effort to develop standards for civil discourse here in the Akron area, and then to actually apply them to the political discourse in the presidential and senatorial campaign this year. And so we did that. We had meetings of a large, diverse group of people. We developed some civility standards, and then we tried them out with a diverse, bipartisan set of evaluators. And we published some of the results in the Beacon Journal, and we have them on the Beacon's hosted a website for us. The Civic Commons has helped continue the conversation about that. So we feel really good that we did the project. Now the question is, where do we go from here?
And that's exactly what I was going to ask. But I want Dan to maybe tell us a little bit about the civility code itself, which is kind of the framework, right?
The idea was that we would ask candidates, and now I'm hoping we can continue to ask elected politicians, if they would agree. We don't want to put this in the language of pledges and things like that, but really just agree to make to approach things with a stance of civility. And so the basic codes have to do with kind of a checklist, because that's easy, right? So does a statement contain offensive language or derogatory comments towards somebody else? Does the statement misrepresent or belittle something that somebody else believes? And does the statement interrupt discussion or silence debate or escalate conflict? If the answer to any of those is yes, then you're not really being civil. I mean, that's basically what we came up with.
And that's actually what was kind of printed in the Beacon, because there was kind of a grading scale based on those kinds of questions.
That's right.
So my question, and let me back up a little bit, because Reverend Swoop, you gave us, I think, the best description of civility last time when you said it's the right to be disagree. It's the right to disagree, but not be disagreeable.
Absolutely.
Correct?
Absolutely. It's the right to have your own opinion, but to recognize that everyone else has an opinion as well, and then to find a place of agreement if you can, but also to find a place of respect if you cannot. And to me, if we can maintain that course, we're on our road to some good things.
You know, I've been thinking about this a lot since we spoke in September, and the idea of like defining civility and what it actually is and what it means. And I keep having these conversations with people across the community, people in the arts, people in politics, people in civic engagement efforts. And one of the conclusions that I've come to is that civility is that so often when we're having debates or arguments or, you know, coming at issues from two different sides, we want to win, right? Mm-hmm. Civility, a stance of civility, and when civility becomes important, it's not about winning. It's not about winning the argument. It's about being understood and about understanding the person that you're talking to.
Exactly.
It's just sort of a recognition that I came to somewhat recently.
Well,
I think that's a really good point. Excuse me, Jody, that's a really good point, because we don't want to be civil just for its own sake, although that's very good, of course. We want to be civil so that we can work together to solve problems. And there's something very productive about this process. And, you know, if we arrive at a point where we can't solve a problem because we're just not to the place where we can at least respect each other, because that lays the groundwork for progress in the future. But, you know, more often than not, I think when people treat each other with respect, they find that they can do things about problems. They can work together.
Not only can you work together, you might not be able to work together at that point, but you leave with a respect for the individual that allows you to go back and rehearse what you heard. And you may be able to hear it again. You may be able to hear it differently once you rehearse it, and therefore when you interact again, you're able to hear better. You're able to listen more definitively, and you're able to listen without reaching conclusions first, so that you can hear better what is being said. And I think that just helps so much, that just that respect level, that I give you the opportunity and the right to have as much sense as I do, and go back and listen and rehear what I've heard before.
So it kind of lays the groundwork for working in the future.
Mm-hmm.
This was the first election that the Civility Code, the Civility Project, had an opportunity to be part of. What impact did this project have on elections?
Boy, that's a really good question. I know that here,
and I'm sorry for asking, but I do want to know. But is there a way to measure that?
We're going to try to work on that. You know, we've collected a lot of these data from applying the Civility Code, and we're going to see what impact we may have had. You know, and there's mixed signals. On the one hand, we had a lot of people talk about this topic, a lot of response to what was published in the newspaper, from what was on the Civic Commons. I mean, I really got the sense that there were a lot of people really interested in this topic. And we've been talking to community leaders about taking this forward into our community, and there's a lot of interest in that, because, as you pointed out, civility isn't just about politics. It's about all other aspects of life as well. But, you know, there were some disappointments. I don't want to blame anybody here, but the United States Senate race hit some kind of all-time low in incivility. You know, there's more than enough blame.
That was the race between Sherrod Brown and Josh Mandel.
And that just got to the point that was unconstructive. So, you know, we would have liked to have had an impact on that race. I don't know that we did, but we're hoping that we'll, you know, as one of our colleagues said, that we'll will set a new temperature to our political debate so that it is calmer, more rational, and easier for people to feel comfortable in that debate.
Diana?
I'm on the ground level, so my role in this was not necessarily working with politicians, but with people. How do you hear these political debates and these political dynamics through the lens of respect, through the lens of civility? How do you hear? And I think for me, what was poignant to me was when I went to early vote. And I stood outside. Well, I went by 3 times the first time, and I absolutely refused to stay. The lines were so long. But I
Which is it's wonderful. It's great. Gratifying that people are voting.
Absolutely wonderful to see, but I wasn't getting in the line in the rain. But I went back anyway. I don't remember what day it was, but to see the deep lines, the long lines, but the joviality of the people. The cooperation. Okay. Everyone was just so calm and peaceful, talking to each other, high-fiving, slapping hands, etc., while we were outside. Now, once we got inside and discovered that the lines were equally as long on the inside as on the outside, things changed just a little bit. And so I could feel the testiness. But at one point, and actually I did this, I stepped out of line, I went to one of the workers, and I congratulated them for how they were managing what I called a zoo. It was just chaos, but they were managing chaos in a way that allowed people to still understand, we're going to get you there. 3, 4, 5 people who were in 2 lines behind me voted before I did, and voted before this person next to me, and she was about to go off. And I just calmly just reached over to her and I said, you know what? Sometimes you have to recognize that people are doing the best they can and allow that to be.
Good intentions.
And she just calmed right down. Yeah. And that, to me, what was suggestive of the fact that these conversations had an impact on the ground level with people.
Sure. Dan, how about you?
I don't think it had as big an impact as we all wish that it had. However, as John pointed to, it has started a really important conversation. And I think the real value is in this ongoing conversation. I'm very interested to see if now that we're all talking about civility as a value that we share, if we can bring our elected officials into that same conversation and get them to agree that this is in fact useful, that it actually, if what we want to do as a society or as a set of elected officials is solve problems, that starting with a basis of civility is a way to get there. That we could maybe change the way that we do business. And if we can, as citizens, find a way to begin to hold our elected officials accountable for behaving in a way that we think actually represents us, because I don't think anybody feels well represented by incivility. But if we can begin to hold them accountable, and I mean just by having conversations with them and reminding them that that's something that we really value, then we might be able to change things. That's what I really want to see.
And what I'm hearing here is that maybe the civility project and the whole concept of civility has taken root in the general public. So is in fact your next step, is it going to be really making sense of this project for the politicians? Because are not they the ones that we need to maybe get on board?
You know, I think we want to do both things, because if you have candid, off-the-record conversations with our political leaders, as most of us have at one time or another, they'll often express genuine regret about the level of discourse. But they'll say, you know, people respond to negativity. You know, what else are we going to do? And you know, what we'd like to be able to say is, look, there's another path.
Do you think that the results of this election, they seem to demonstrate that that negative ads are not always the way to go? That negative ads won't win you elections. That seems to be part of what we've learned, or at least what I think I've learned, but I don't know if political science would tell us the same thing. I mean, is that one of the lessons of this, of 2012?
I think one of the lessons is that there are limits to negativity. At some point, people either tune you out or stop participating when it reaches beyond a certain critical point.
Here in Ohio, we passed that critical point a while ago.
We passed that critical point, yeah.
July, we passed that critical point.
And what was interesting to me was, you know, a lot of the people who put these ads together and raised that money have been, at least privately, saying the same thing. You know, we reached the point of diminishing returns. And maybe our resources need to be used another way. Because while negativity works in some context, it doesn't work always, and it can often backfire.
Exactly. I was going to say negativity quite often mobilizes your opposition and causes them to say, oh, no, we must do something about it. This is so insidious. This is so divisive and derisive. We cannot sit back and allow you to be in office with that kind of character. So it sometimes mobilizes your opposition. And I think it did backfire on several.
Well, we're almost out of time for this televised portion of our discussion, but we are going to take it to the web. But I do have one question I need to ask all of you, and that would be, okay, where do you go from here? Where does the Ohio Civility Project go?
Well, like I said before, I mean, I think we should be talking directly to our elected officials, these wonderful women and men who won election, who won the office. Now we need to remind them, look, this is important to us. We want to see problems solved. There's the partisanship, whether it's in Congress or Columbus, needs to come to an end, this hyper-partisanship. And we need to start, changing the way it is. Whether somebody suggested the other day, I think that in Congress, rather than sitting on two sides of the aisle, they should sit DR, 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 so they can get to know each other a little better. Because they're not hanging out and going to bars or going golfing or whatever they used to do.
Yeah. John, we got a minute left.
I think we need to take this out into the community, and we have plans to try to institutionalize this process, working with community partners, so that not only can we bring this to the attention of our officials, but we can continue the conversation with all the people in our community.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you all for being here for our post-election coverage. Like I said, we're going to continue to sit and discuss for a few more minutes here on the web. But and thank you also for being part of this project that really is something that's very needed, and I think can change a way of looking at politics. So thank you. Thank you for joining us for this edition, this post-election edition of Newsnight. And as I said, go to www.newsnite.net, and you'll hear more of our discussions. I also want to thank Stephanie Warsmith and Steve Hoffman. They were here also. Good night.